the problem with the Lutyens media is that when a cause that they are so closely attached to, when that cause proves to be a cause that doesn't stand the test of law, then they want to underplay it. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, the noise they made about WAQF, the noise they made about anti-CA, the noise they made about Shaheen Bagh, the noise they made about NRC, but when it was finally proven that none of the noise they created could be argued with facts, with arguments in a court of law, and that also in the Supreme Court or the higher appellate courts of this country, then they become quiet. That is why the Lutyens media is not leading with the biggest news of the day, which is that the Supreme Court has refused to put any ban on the Modi government's WAQF Amendment Act 2025. And the Supreme Court said there's no reason to do this. After all, and I agree with the Supreme Court, it is the job of the central government duly elected, represented by the will of the Parliament, duly elected to enact laws. The enactment of laws is the role of the Parliament. And if the Supreme Court was to come in and always nullify what the Parliament does, then the Supreme Court would be over-enthusiastically treading into the role of the legislature or the role of the duly elected executive. And I am very glad that good sense has prevailed in this case of the WAQF. The Supreme Court has not done that. The Supreme Court has said, why should we? Why should we put a ban on the WAQF Act? Remember, ladies and gentlemen, just before Pahalgam happened, there were certain leaders, a lot of Muslim leaders, who wanted to break up this country on communal lines, who said we will hit the streets over WAQF, only because the central government had pointed out that the WAQF boards had been siphoning off people's money and instead of using it for rightful causes, obviously been putting it into their own pockets. And I had said at that point of time, don't believe these Muslim leaders. They are not representing the will, the intent, or the interest of the Muslim community. They are only representing their own pecuniary and monetary benefits. But many people said, Arnab, you're a right-winger. But they should say today that Arnab is not a right-winger. He was saying the right thing. Ladies and gentlemen, the Supreme Court has said we are not going to put any kind of total ban on WAQF. The court has emphasized that laws enacted in Parliament enjoy a presumption of validity and stays should be granted only in the rarest of rare cases. Now, this is also very important. Of late, there has been a trend that on any issue whatsoever, you create a bit of a halla, create a stir, issue a threat, do a press conference, get the pseudo-secular media on your side, threaten chaos and anarchy in this country, then through your usual lawyers, some of whom thankfully have retired now, through your usual lawyer set, put pressure on the Supreme Court, even attack the Supreme Court bench if required, get articles written in certain pro-pseudo-lobby-based legal websites, and use this entire ecosystem to overthrow the will of Parliament. The Supreme Court has said you cannot do that. Parliament has its place. The Supreme Court has its place. That is the real headline that none of this pseudo-secular media will be reporting today, that the Supreme Court has clearly said we have no intention to encroach upon the will of the Parliament. Ladies and gentlemen, overall the Supreme Court's order upholds the WAQF Amendment Act while ensuring some judicial safeguards, making it a significant legal and administrative victory for the centre. I only wish, and I can only pray, and I can only request on behalf of all right-thinking people in this country, sane minds, that these provocateurs like Asaduddin Owaisi, like the All India Muslim Personal Law Board, sometimes realize that there is a rule of law in this country represented by Parliament, represented by government, and represented by Supreme Court. If Asaduddin Owaisi wants to determine what the future of this country should be, if he wants people to practice polygamy, if he wants to allow nikah halala to happen, if he wants to have WAQF boards siphon off the money of the people, first of all, he should not have such aspirations. But if he does, he, instead of being a sole MP from his party, should win 400 seats in Parliament, become the Prime Minister of India, enact a law which will be valid in the Supreme Court. Threatening anarchy, Mr. Owaisi, is no way. Absolutely no way. The law has prevailed. So the Supreme Court has upheld the law which has been passed by Parliament. It should be the end of the matter. Let's unite the country, not divide. Nation first, no compromise.